My friends, there is no burden heavier than the constant hunger for approval. It is a hunger that devours without ever satisfying. Like a mirage in the desert, the applause of the world promises fulfillment but offers only emptiness. The one who builds his life upon the shifting sands of human approval will find himself ever restless, ever anxious, ever uncertain of where he stands. There is a path, however, that is surer, though it is not always easy. It is the path of self-respect, the quiet, unwavering commitment to what is true, even when no one cheers for it. To choose this path is to choose something infinitely more valuable than popularity. It is to choose freedom. The world whispers, adjust yourself. Become what others wish you to be, and you will be loved. But I ask, what love is this? Is it truly love if it demands the sacrifice of your conscience? Is it kindness when it asks you to trade the truth for comfort? No, my friends, it is not love but a form of bondage. The need for approval is a chain, and the more we seek it, the tighter it binds us. History has seen many who stood alone, yet in their solitude, they found greatness. They were mocked, ridiculed, cast aside, but they stood firm, and the world, and time, turned to honor them. Why? Because they valued truth over applause, conscience over convenience, and self-respect over approval. Do not misunderstand me. Respecting oneself is not an excuse for arrogance, nor is it a dismissal of wise counsel. But there is a profound difference between learning from others and living for their validation. To live for the approval of the crowd is to be at their mercy, tossed like a leaf in the wind. But to stand firm in what is right is to be like a tree, deeply rooted, unshaken by the storms of opinion. What, then, is the reward of self-respect? It is peace. Not the peace that the world offers, the fragile peace that depends on the goodwill of others, but the peace that comes from knowing that, whatever may come, you have remained true to what is right. The desire for approval is one of the most subtle yet powerful forces shaping human behavior. From childhood, we are conditioned to seek validation, whether from parents, teachers, friends, or society at large. The warm glow of praise, the reassuring nod of acceptance, and the comforting embrace of belonging all create a sense of security. We learn, often without realizing it, to adjust ourselves to fit the expectations of those around us. Yet, what begins as a natural longing for connection can easily transform into a relentless pursuit of validation, one that slowly erodes our sense of self. Approval, by its very nature, is fleeting. One moment, a person may be celebrated, praised for their words, actions, or accomplishments. The next, they may find themselves the target of criticism, forgotten or dismissed by the very people who once applauded them. The applause of the world is an unreliable foundation upon which to build a life. It shifts with changing opinions, trends, and the moods of those around us. If one's sense of worth is anchored in external validation, then life becomes a constant effort to measure up to an ever-changing standard, a race with no finish line. The danger of this pursuit is not merely that approval is unreliable, but that it often demands a sacrifice. To be accepted, one may feel compelled to suppress their true thoughts, adjust their beliefs, or alter their character to align with what is deemed acceptable by others. Over time, this compromises authenticity. A person who constantly molds themselves to gain approval may reach a point where they no longer recognize who they truly are. The pursuit of validation turns into a slow erosion of identity, where personal convictions are exchanged for the temporary comfort of acceptance. The need for approval can lead to dependence. If one grows accustomed to shaping their choices around the expectations of others, they risk becoming incapable of making decisions without external reassurance. They hesitate, fearing rejection or judgment, unsure of their own ability to stand firm in their beliefs without the confirmation of those around them. This dependence creates a kind of bondage, where one's sense of self-worth is no longer determined internally but is entirely subject to the whims of society. Worse still, those who seek approval above all else often find themselves trapped in a cycle of dissatisfaction. Even when they receive the validation they long for, the satisfaction is short-lived. The moment praise is given, a new fear arises, the fear of losing it. They must now work even harder to maintain the favor of others, to ensure that they do not fall out of their good graces. Thus, approval, rather than providing true contentment, fuels an unending anxiety. The person who lives for the applause of others finds no peace, for their sense of worth is always at risk of being taken away. It is also important to recognize that the pursuit of approval can distort one's moral compass. Many times, what is right is not popular, and what is popular is not right. Those who prioritize validation may find themselves pressured to conform to ideas or actions that contradict their own principles. The fear of standing alone becomes greater than the desire to uphold what is true. Slowly, they may begin justifying small compromises, telling themselves that it is only a small price to pay for acceptance. Yet, the danger lies in the cumulative effect. One small compromise leads to another, and soon they find themselves far from the convictions they once held dear. Those who choose self-respect over approval find a different kind of strength. They may not always receive applause, and at times, they may face criticism, isolation, or misunderstanding. However, what they gain is something far greater, an unshakable sense of integrity. While the approval of others fluctuates, the satisfaction of remaining true to oneself remains steady. They are not burdened by the anxiety of constant validation, nor do they fear the changing tides of opinion. Instead, they walk with a quiet confidence, knowing that their worth is not dependent on the shifting preferences of the world. The pursuit of approval often demands a price, and that price is compromise of values, beliefs, and even the core of one's identity. At first, these compromises may seem small, almost insignificant. A person may silence their true thoughts in a conversation to avoid conflict, agree with an opinion they do not share for the sake of harmony, or engage in behavior that feels unnatural simply to fit in. These moments are easy to dismiss as necessary social adjustments, the harmless sacrifices required to maintain relationships and acceptance. Yet, what begins as a slight bending of one's convictions can slowly turn into a habit of self-betrayal. The more one compromises, the easier it becomes, until the lines between what is true and what is convenient blur beyond recognition. There is a quiet but profound danger in shaping oneself to meet the expectations of others. With each compromise, a person distances themselves from their true nature, exchanging authenticity for acceptance. Over time, they may no longer recognize where their own thoughts and the influence of others begins. They begin to speak not from conviction but from calculation, choosing words that will win approval rather than express truth. They act not out of genuine desire, but out of obligation, measuring each decision against the fear of rejection. In doing so, they lose the ability to trust their own judgment, for their choices are no longer their own but dictated by the shifting preferences of those around them. Such a life, though it may appear harmonious on the surface, is fraught with unease. A person who constantly compromises for approval may find themselves surrounded by people who admire them, yet they will always wonder if that admiration is truly for them or for the version of themselves they have carefully constructed to be accepted. They may receive praise, yet the praise will feel hollow, for it is not directed at their true self but at the mask they wear. Deep down, they will feel the weight of knowing that their relationships, their successes, and even their identity are built on a foundation of concession rather than conviction. The habit of compromise does not merely affect the individual, it affects the world around them. When people prioritize approval over integrity, they contribute to a culture where truth is secondary to acceptance, where doing what is popular is valued more than doing what is right. This is how societies drift toward moral complacency, where difficult but necessary truths are silenced in favor of comfortable illusions. History is filled with examples of those who chose to remain silent in the face of wrongdoing, not because they did not recognize it, but because speaking out would have cost them their reputation, their friendships, or their place within a group. In this way, the personal cost of compromise extends beyond the individual. It becomes a collective loss, a failure to stand for what is just and true. The cost of compromise is not merely the loss of personal authenticity, but the loss of something far greater, self-respect. A person may gain approval by surrendering their beliefs, but they will never truly respect themselves for doing so. No amount of validation from others can replace the quiet dignity of knowing that one has remained true to their conscience. Those who sacrifice integrity for acceptance may be surrounded by admirers, yet they will find themselves alone in their thoughts, haunted by the knowledge that they have traded what is right for what is easy. The temptation to compromise remains strong because the alternative, standing firm in one's values, often comes with difficulty. Choosing integrity may lead to isolation. It may mean losing relationships, facing criticism, or being misunderstood. The world does not always reward those who refuse to conform. Yet, while the cost of standing firm can be high, the cost of compromising is far greater. A person who remains true to their principles, even when it is difficult, gains something that no approval can provide, the unwavering confidence that they have lived honestly, without regret or pretense. Those who refuse to compromise for approval may not always be the most celebrated, but they are the most at peace. They do not live in fear of exposure, for they have nothing to hide. They do not wrestle with regret, for they have not abandoned their convictions for the sake of convenience. They do not seek constant reassurance, for their sense of worth is not dependent on the shifting opinions of others. They walk through life with a quiet strength, secure in the knowledge that while they may not always be accepted, they have always remained true. When it leads to growth and understanding, can be a virtue. But when it is driven by the fear of disapproval, it becomes a slow erosion of the soul. The price of approval, if it demands the sacrifice of self-respect, is too high a cost to pay. The world will always offer rewards for conformity, applause, belonging, even success, but these are empty victories if they come at the expense of one's own integrity. And so, the choice remains, to live for approval or to live for truth. Only one of these paths leads to a life of true fulfillment. There is a quiet but undeniable strength in the person who stands firm in their convictions, unmoved by the shifting winds of public opinion. Conviction is not mere stubbornness, nor is it blind resistance to change. It is the unwavering commitment to what one knows to be true, even in the face of opposition. A person of conviction does not seek validation from the crowd, nor do they adjust their beliefs to gain favor. They do not measure their worth by the approval of others, but by the alignment of their actions with their conscience. They understand that truth is not something to be bargained with, nor is integrity a thing to be traded for temporary acceptance. The strength of conviction does not reveal itself in moments of comfort, but in times of trial. It is easy to hold to one's beliefs when they are met with applause, but the true test of character comes when those beliefs are challenged, ridiculed, or rejected. In such moments, many find it easier to retreat, to soften their stance, to blend into the expectations of the majority. They reason that it is better to adjust than to stand alone, that the cost of disapproval is too great. The one who possesses true conviction understands that surrendering to fear is far costlier than standing firm. For to betray one's beliefs, even once, is to set a precedent for future compromise, and with each surrender, the foundation of integrity weakens. The world has always had its share of those who follow the crowd, bending their principles to fit the moment. These individuals may find temporary security in the approval of others, but their sense of self is fragile, dependent on the ever-changing judgments of society. They are like leaves in the wind, constantly adjusting their direction, never rooted in anything solid. But the person of conviction stands like a tree, deeply planted in the soil of truth. They may be battered by storms, they may face resistance, but they do not break. They do not need the approval of others to validate what they know in their heart to be right. Conviction is not only a source of inner strength, but also a guiding force in decision-making. When a person lives with unwavering principles, they are spared the exhaustion of indecision. They do not waste energy trying to please everyone, nor do they wrestle with the fear of making unpopular choices. They act with clarity, knowing that their path is determined not by convenience or acceptance, but by what is right. Their decisions are not shaped by fleeting opinions, but by enduring truths. This clarity grants them a rare kind of freedom, the freedom to live without pretense, without hesitation, without the constant worry of whether their choices will be met with approval. There is also a certain courage in conviction, for standing firm in one's beliefs often invites opposition. The world is not always kind to those who refuse to conform. To be a person of conviction is to risk being misunderstood, criticized, or even rejected. It is to face the reality that not everyone will accept or agree with your principles. Yet, those who possess true conviction do not waver in the face of adversity. They do not allow the fear of disapproval to dictate their choices, nor do they allow the pressure of the majority to silence their voice. They understand that standing alone is not a sign of weakness but of great strength. The strength of conviction also inspires others. People may not always agree with those who stand firm in their beliefs, but they often respect them. There is something undeniably compelling about a person who refuses to compromise their principles, who remains unshaken in their pursuit of truth. Such individuals become beacons of integrity, reminders that character is not built on popularity but on steadfastness. They encourage others to examine their own convictions, to question whether they are living by their true beliefs or merely by the expectations of those around them. History remembers those who stood by their convictions, not those who merely followed the crowd. The great figures of the past, those who shaped history, challenged injustice, and fought for what was right, were often met with resistance in their time. They were mocked, opposed, even persecuted. Yet, they did not waver. They did not allow fear to silence them or the lure of approval to weaken their resolve. And in the end, it was their unwavering commitment to truth that left a lasting impact. The strength of conviction is not something that is given, it is something that must be cultivated. It requires courage, self-awareness, and the willingness to endure discomfort. It demands that one look beyond the immediate consequences of standing firm and see the greater value of remaining true to oneself. Those who cultivate this strength do not live in fear of rejection, nor do they seek constant affirmation. They are at peace, not because the world always agrees with them, but because they know that they have not betrayed their own soul. To live with conviction is to live with dignity. It is to walk through life unburdened by the weight of compromise, unshaken by the opinions of others. It is to possess a kind of inner strength that cannot be taken away, a quiet but unbreakable confidence that one has remained true. And in a world that so often rewards conformity, this strength is not just rare, it is invaluable. Freedom is a word that is often spoken, yet rarely understood in its truest sense. Many believe that freedom is the ability to do as one pleases, to follow every whim, and to live without constraint. They see it as the absence of rules, the rejection of limitations, and the removal of all expectations imposed by others. But this kind of freedom is an illusion, a mirage that leads not to fulfillment but to emptiness. True freedom is not found in the ability to please everyone, nor is it discovered in the pursuit of external validation. Instead, it is rooted in the courage to live according to one's own principles, unshaken by the need for approval. The need for approval is, in many ways, a form of bondage. A person who constantly seeks validation from others is never truly free, for their every action is dictated by the fear of rejection. They measure their words carefully, ensuring that they do not offend or challenge the expectations of those around them. They suppress their true thoughts, believing that honesty may cost them acceptance. They adjust their behavior, not because it aligns with their values, but because it secures them a place in the good graces of society. In doing so, they become prisoners not of physical chains, but of invisible ones, bound by the opinions of others. True freedom begins the moment a person realizes that their worth is not dependent on the approval of the crowd. It is the realization that no applause, no validation, and no external praise can replace the deep, unshakable peace that comes from living with integrity. The person who understands this does not feel the need to conform for the sake of acceptance. They do not sacrifice their beliefs simply to avoid disapproval. They are free because their sense of self is not dictated by the shifting tides of public opinion. The irony of seeking approval is that it often leads to the exact opposite of freedom. A person who lives for the praise of others must constantly work to maintain it. They must anticipate what people want to hear, adjust their words accordingly, and ensure that they remain in good standing with those whose opinions they value. But in this endless pursuit, they lose the very thing they desire most, the ability to live authentically. Their choices are no longer their own. Their path is shaped not by their own convictions, but by the ever-changing expectations of others. This is not freedom. It is servitude to the unpredictable demands of the world. In its truest form, is the ability to act in accordance with what one knows to be right, regardless of how others may perceive it. It is the courage to speak the truth, even when it is unpopular. It is the strength to stand alone, even when the majority chooses a different path. It is the quiet confidence that comes from knowing that one's actions are guided by principle, not by the fear of rejection. This kind of freedom cannot be taken away, for it is not given by the world, it is built from within. The pursuit of approval places an impossible burden on the human soul. It demands constant effort, relentless adjustment, and a willingness to betray one's true self in order to fit in. And no amount of approval can ever satisfy the deep longing for real peace. Those who spend their lives chasing validation may find temporary satisfaction in applause, but it will never be enough. There will always be another expectation to meet, another standard to fulfill, another person to please. The freedom they long for will remain just out of reach, always dependent on the fickle acceptance of others. Those who embrace true freedom experience a life of profound simplicity. They do not carry the weight of constant approval seeking. They do not waste energy calculating their every move, ensuring that they do not fall out of favor. Instead, they live with clarity, knowing that their choices are guided not by the opinions of others, but by the principles they hold dear. They are free from the exhausting need to fit into every mold, to please every person, and to chase every passing trend. Their lives are not dictated by fear, but by a quiet and unwavering strength. It is a difficult thing to break free from the need for approval, for society often teaches that acceptance is the highest form of success. From an early age, people are conditioned to believe that belonging is the greatest reward, that being liked is a sign of worth, and that standing alone is a sign of failure. Yet, history is filled with those who proved otherwise. The greatest thinkers, leaders, and visionaries were not those who sought to be liked, but those who had the courage to be true to their convictions. They were not enslaved by the opinions of their time, they were liberated by their refusal to compromise their values. True freedom is not found in the absence of responsibility, nor is it discovered in the pursuit of personal desires at the expense of integrity. It is found in the strength to live with authenticity, regardless of the cost. It is found in the ability to stand firm, even when standing alone. It is found in the realization that self-respect is worth far more than the fleeting approval of the world. Those who choose this path may not always be understood, and they may not always be celebrated, but they will always be free.